Let's talk some Michigan recruiting. The Wolverines finished 6th in the 2025 cycle, but after the way it finished, you know what I'm talking about, with the acquisition of Bryce Underwood, Haywood, a couple others, you've got to wonder, is this cycle in 2026 a top 5 finish, maybe even top 3 for Michigan? Well, I got Holland from the Wolverine on this video, and we're going to hit on some of Michigan's most important targets in 2026. But before we get started, Michigan fans, do me a favor. Hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. This is the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube. All right, let's bring on Holland from the Wolverine. We got to hit on some of these big names, starting with offensive tackle, the industry's #1 overall, Jackson Cantwell. Here's what I want to say about Jackson Cantwell. We had Steve Wiltfong, Chad Simmons on. They didn't think that Michigan was in the top tier right now, but they both agreed. When it's all said and done, they think Michigan's going to be a major factor in this recruitment. I want to ask you why. What do you think Michigan has going for them with Jackson Cantwell?
NIL. Next question. No, I'm just kidding. NIL, obviously. I think with Jackson Cantwell, he already has an agent, Drew Rosenhaus, who obviously is one of the power agents, not just with NIL, but in all of professional sports, college sports. I mean, if you think of an agent, Drew Rosenhaus is top of mind. And so for Jackson Cantwell to already be signed with his agency, I think speaks volumes about how serious NIL is in this recruitment. And when you look at a school like Michigan, they are putting a premium on offensive linemen. They were willing to put together a very strong package for Andrew Babalola. They obviously put one together for Haywood without making offensive line a premium position, and without the NIL backing, Michigan wouldn't have landed Haywood. Mm-hmm. So I think that with Jackson Cantwell, they're willing to maybe do something similar. I'm not sure it's a necessity to do that after landing Andrew Babalola and Haywood. But again, Michigan really values the offensive line. It wasn't up to par this past season. Sharon Moore is an offensive line guy, and he knows winning starts up front. And so he wants to put together the best offensive line possible. They're already, having discussions with Jackson Cantwell. He's already spoken to some people around Barstool Sports, which I thought was interesting. Obviously, you have Dave Portnoy who runs that. So I think that's a little interesting tidbit there. Also, Sean McGee, Michigan's general manager, has been a critical piece in revamping Michigan's NIL. Sean McGee went out there with Sharon Moore to see Jackson Cantwell during the contact period last month. So I think Michigan is probably, in the middle somewhere of that top group that he released. He's been to campus once, which took place in December. He's set to come back to campus, whether it's for a spring visit or for an OV, maybe both. So, I think what Michigan has to offer is obviously NIL, but also but also offensive line production. Sharon Moore's background as an offensive lineman, an offensive line coach, a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line coach, and then Grant Newsome, Michigan's actual offensive line coach right now, played along the offensive line at Michigan too. So I think that Michigan has a lot going for it when it comes to landing elite offensive linemen. They landed 2 this cycle. They can do the same next cycle.
All right. Now, Michigan also has a rich tradition of landing elite running backs in this cycle. They are in it for the #1 running back, Savion Hiter. He's out of Virginia. Who do you view as Michigan's best or top competition right now? I know it's really early, but who are the Wolverines battling?
Yeah, when it comes to Savion Hiter, I would say Michigan still has the momentum in that recruitment, but Georgia has really made a strong impression. They were the only school that hosted him for a visit in January. Georgia has a new running backs coach, so I think Michigan has a little bit of a built-in advantage in the sense that Tony Alford, Michigan's running backs coach, has known Savion for years, has recruited him dating back to his time at Ohio State. But Kirby Smart has done a fantastic job of personally recruiting Hiter. Georgia will get him back on campus for an official visit and maybe a spring visit. So I would say right now, Michigan, Georgia are the schools that are maybe at the top. Ohio State has definitely made a strong push as well. So I think Michigan needs to keep doing what it's doing, though. This is another one where Michigan has the NIL backing. They've shown a willingness to invest in the running back position. They did it with Justice Haynes out of the transfer portal. And, from what I've heard early on, they're going to be willing to put together a really strong package for Hiter as well. He's at the very top of the board along with Javian Osborne. So, right now, Michigan still trending in the right direction, but Georgia's going to turn up the heat. Ohio State is going to turn up the heat. We'll see if anybody else really jumps in the mix there. Tennessee is a little bit of a dark horse. Penn State's still involved, but right now I think Michigan needs to just keep doing what it's doing. It has the relationships. It's gotten Hiter on campus many times. So I think their visit in January made a strong impression, but we'll see. Hiter doesn't want to make a decision until the summer, so still a long time to go.
Yeah. Another position that we know is paid a premium by Michigan is tight end, and there's a good one on the board. Brock Harris. He goes 6'6", 240 pounds. He's out of Utah. What do you think right now of where the Wolverines stand with this prospect?
Yeah, Brock recently released his top 6. I think Michigan is definitely towards the top in that recruitment. Another one where, you could see Michigan and Georgia battling out. I think the schools close to home. Anytime you recruit a Utah kid, you're going to have to recruit against Utah, BYU, the schools closer to home. But I think Michigan's done a great job in this recruitment. Michigan tight ends coach Steve Casula arrived as part of the program last year and immediately made Brock a top priority. He's been to campus twice already. He's looking at making his 3rd visit in the spring and then coming back for an official visit. So even though he's way out west, he's already been to campus multiple times. He feels like a top priority. Michigan can obviously sell not only tight end production, but a need for a tight end. If you remember, Michigan lost Andrew Olesh, a 5-star tight end, to Penn State in the 11th hour on National Signing Day in December. So they only ended up with one tight end commit in 2025. That's Eli Owens, who's more of an H-back, fullback type of prospect. So Michigan really has a need for a big, tall, true receiving threat at the tight end position, kind of your next Colston Loveland. That's really what they've been pitching to both Brock Harris and Matt Ludwig, who's an on-300 tight end out of Montana. They are at the top of the tight end board early on. Again, I think if I were to say where Michigan stands with both Brock Harris and Matt Ludwig, I would definitely say top 3 for both.
Wow. All right. Let's talk about the number 1 player in the state of Michigan. Last year at this time, the number 1 player in the state of Michigan was headed to the SEC. In the end, Bryce Underwood was a Wolverine, but this year it's wide receiver CJ Sadler. He's from Cass Tech, top 100 prospect overall. Is Michigan making him a priority early on?
Oh, most definitely. Michigan has had plenty of success recruiting at Cass Tech over the years. And I think something that Sharon Moore wants to do as head coach is seal the borders. I mean, they want to keep their top talent at home. I think the state of Michigan has a couple of big-time priorities in 26 in Gregory Patrick and CJ Sadler. And then 2027 is absolutely loaded in the state. So Moore's kind of, forward thinking in keeping that elite talent that's to come. But CJ is terrific. He's been on the radar for a long time. He's had a Michigan offer for several years. I remember covering CJ as a 7th grader, 8th grader. So it's crazy to see that he's about to enter his senior year. So he's been to Michigan double-digit times. He has a terrific relationship with Sharon Moore, with Michigan wide receivers coach Ron Bellamy. I think CJ wants to continue to take some visits, but he is close to Bryce Underwood as well. That's a big selling point for wide receivers. Obviously, they came up together through Detroit's Sound Mind, Sound Body 7-on-7 program. So I think with Bryce on board, with Sharon Moore making a push locally, with his relationships with some of the other players on the team, the staff, I think Michigan is the team to beat for CJ Sadler early on. And, Michigan needs top-end wide receivers. CJ's as electrifying as you can get in the slot. I think they're going to have some NIL discussions with Ohio State wide receiver commit Chris Henry Jr. They're making a hard push for on 300 wide receivers Travis Johnson and Nolan Scott. But I think CJ's kind of a little bit of a different type of receiver, just a dynamic guy that you can put in the slot, can return kicks and punts, kind of Tavon Austin-esque.
All right. Now, Michigan brought in a really solid DB class last cycle, and they're back at it. We're talking Jett Washington, the number 3 safety in the land, number 35 overall, so borderline 5-star here. He's 6'4", 185 at the safety position. Does Michigan have a shot here with Washington? On3 is honored to announce the next stop of the Next Greatest Generation Tour at Cherokee High School in Rogersville, Tennessee. In partnership with the Army National Guard, we are proud to recognize Cherokee High School as a Team of the Year. This season, the Cherokee Chiefs demonstrated remarkable selflessness, resiliency, and determination in the face of adversity. While their community narrowly avoided the worst of Hurricane Helene's destruction, their neighbors in Greene County were not as fortunate. When West Greene Middle School was left without access to water or a place to practice due to severe flooding, Cherokee High School stepped up, offering their facilities and even providing lunch for the displaced team. Their season was further marked by emotional challenges. On September 13th, during a pivotal conference game against Elizabethton, Cherokee head coach received the devastating news that his father had passed away, forcing him to leave the game in the second half. Despite the loss that night, the Chiefs responded with incredible resilience, winning 4 straight conference games and securing their first playoff berth since 2019. Please join us in congratulating Cherokee High School on this well-deserved honor. We look forward to celebrating the Chiefs tomorrow night as part of the Next Greatest Generation Tour.
Yeah, I think Jett is willing to leave, the Western U.S. He has been to Alabama. He's been to Ohio State. He's been to Michigan. I think all those schools have legitimate shots in his recruitment. Sharon Moore went out and personally visited him a few weeks ago. Jett was on campus in the fall. He told me he's looking to get back to campus at some point this spring. He's a high academic kid, high character kid, kind of fits the Michigan mold. And Michigan's invested a lot of resources in Bishop Gorman. They've been to the school many times over the last couple of years. They recently landed running back Micah Kaapana out of Bishop Gorman. So I think they are starting to, kind of build their brand or their name at Bishop Gorman, which is obviously one of the premier high schools, not just in the Western U.S., but the entire country. So yeah, I think Jett Washington also kind of fills a void that Michigan didn't this cycle. As great as the secondary haul was, with 5 on 300 prospects, including 3 top 100 prospects, they wanted a bigger, longer box safety type of guy, and they didn't really get that. I think Jett Washington is a phenomenal athlete. He's 6'3.5", 6'4", terrific basketball player, really lengthy. They wanted that type of safety this cycle, didn't get him. So I think 2026 Jett Washington is the prototypical guy they want to fill that void.
All right. Last thing I want to talk to you about is the quarterback position. We had Brady Smeagol on the show last week. He gave a great interview. He told us, fresh off this decommitment from Florida State, that he has some renewed interest in Michigan. Coach Sharon Moore was out to see him. He's in no rush to make a decision, probably later on this summer. Brady Smeagol, top 10 quarterback at the position. Who else is a top target for Michigan at the quarterback position this cycle?
Yeah, quarterback's kind of interesting, right? Because you landed Bryce Underwood in 2025, so it's kind of a tough selling point, especially when his NIL was very public and all over social media. Michigan invested a lot in Bryce Underwood. He's the future of the program. He's probably going to start, for 3 years and be out of there. Probably get significant playing time, if not start this year. So you kind of are coming in knowing that. And I think it's going to be tough for Michigan to land that elite level quarterback in 26, but a guy that makes perfect sense and I think has an argument as the top quarterback in the country is Ryder Lyons. And the reason Ryder Lyons makes so much sense is, yes, he's a 5-star, but he's taking a mission. So he technically wouldn't enroll at the school of his choice until 2027. That gives enough separation between Bryce Underwood. By the time Lyons arrives on campus, Underwood would already be junior or going into his junior year. And on top of that, Lyons will probably need a little bit of time to get back in the groove of things coming back from a mission. Whenever these kids go on missions, it's a very rigorous commitment and you're away from football. You only get a day to work out every week. So I think a lot of times when kids come back, they need maybe a year to really get back into the swing of things, to get acclimated. So I think that would be, the dream scenario would be to move from Bryce Underwood to Rider Lions. But I still think that's a little bit of a tough hill to climb. I think USC, where his brother plays, is probably the favorite right now. There are several other major programs involved, so that one's going to be a tough win. So you look at some other options. You mentioned Brady Smeagol. He's a really interesting prospect. Michigan, you could make the argument that Michigan should go after a high ceiling quarterback after Bryce Underwood, someone you want to develop. But you can also make the argument that Michigan didn't have any real high floor prospects, so its quarterback room suffered this year. I think Brady Smeagol is a little bit of a, sure bet. He's kind of on the older side for his grade. He's actually older than Bryce Underwood. He's very productive at the high school level. He's a top 100 prospect. I think that, Smeagol would be a guy that you can bring in. He can be a reliable option. And, like I said, he's very productive, very smart, a coach's kid. So he makes a lot of sense. But you could also go the, alternate route and bring in a really high upside kid, a guy you develop and could turn into something special. I think Oscar Rios fits that mold, also out of California. He's a little bit on the thinner side, but taller pocket passer at 6'3", 175. Also a big threat with his legs. I mean, his running ability is very, very impressive. Something that, a guy like Smeagol doesn't necessarily have. So, I think those guys are, some options to watch early on. And then Michigan just entered the mix for a really interesting prospect, Matt Ponatoski, out of Ohio. He's from the same school as Jordan Marshall at Cincinnati Moeller. He was the Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Ohio. He's definitely one that Michigan likes early on, and I could see him being a take, even though he's across enemy lines. Michigan already landed Jordan Marshall from that same school, so Ponatoski could be one to watch as well.
All right, EJ, ton of intel. We will just have to see. Does Michigan finish top 5 or higher in 2026?